Hello and welcome to Your Broken Galaxy. Today I'm continuing the saga of What If Luke Was Fat. This is part 2, so it is going to be pretty much The Empire Strikes Back with a Luke that is fat. If you haven't seen part 1, I'd recommend you check that one out first. The Empire is searching relentlessly for the rebels who have fled to Hoth to avoid the wrath of the Emperor. Luke and Han are about to go on patrol, but as soon as the Tauntaun sees Luke is about to mount him, he starts freaking out. He gets it under control, and Luke ends up getting on top, but the thing can barely move and is in noticeable agony. They go for a ride, and Han sees a meteorite, and he says, "I'm gonna go check it out." And then Luke gets smacked in the face by a Wampa. A few hours later, he wakes up looking down at the snow. It seems like he was drug about 5 feet, but then the monster gave up. The Wampa could have drug Luke the whole way, but dragging the very large Luke and the Tauntaun at the same time was just too much work. So Luke grabs his radio and is like, "Oh man, it's like 3 miles back to base. I better just call it in." Just before he calls in, Obi-Wan shows up in ghost form and is like, "Luke, don't call the base. Just walk there. It'll take less than an hour. Also, you should probably go to Dagobah to find Yoda and continue your training." So Luke immediately calls it to the base, despite what Obi-Wan says, and they send out a speeder to bring him in. As he is recovering from the face injury in the bacta tank, Han walks in and sees Luke in a diaper and cannot help but laugh. He ends up taking a picture that he plans to use for a mean joke later on, and then Leia comes to visit, and her and Han get in a fight, and she says, "I guess you don't know very much about women after all." And she looks at Luke and says, "Why can't you be a nice guy like Luke?" And Luke puts his hand behind his head as Leia storms off without kissing him. Han looks at Luke and says, "Don't get cocky, kid. She wants a scoundrel. All women do." And Luke says, "But she thinks I'm nice." "Good for you," Han says. So the Imperials find Hoth. Han destroys the probe droid. Admiral Ozzel flies the fleet too close, and Vader kills him. Luke is better, so he jumps into an airspeeder, and the fight is on. He is able to do some damage, but he ends up getting shot down. Unfortunately, unlike in the original, Luke is too fat to get out of the airspeeder quickly, and the AT-AT steps on him, crushing him. Nah, I'm just playing. I know you guys wouldn't accept an ending like that, so we'll keep going. Luke is able to squeeze him out of the speeder, but he's just too slow to keep up with the AT-ATs to try to destroy one of them, so he ends up very slowly trudging back to base. When he gets there, everybody has already left. He gets in his X-Wing and flies off to Dagobah. Crashing it into the swamp, he takes a good 5 minutes to get out of the X-Wing, and then Yoda sneaks up on him. Yoda invites him back to his house, but Luke can't fit inside the house. He's just stuck outside in the rain. After complaining about the rain and having to wait, the Muppet sighs and says, "I can't train him. He's too fat." And Obi-Wan says, "You know what? I'm not gonna lie. I realize that is a problem." And Luke is like, "What? You're Yoda?" And Yoda says, "Yoda I am." And Luke says, "I can train. I can lose the weight." And Yoda says, "Lose weight, can you? When Obi-Wan you met, how much did you weigh?" And Luke says, 310 pounds. And Yoda says, "And now?" And Luke says, "I weigh 305 pounds. 5 pounds in 3 years' time. A great accomplishment, is not?" Yoda chastises him, but they are pretty much stuck with him, so Luke starts his training. Meanwhile, Leia and Han were on the run from the Empire. They got stuck in the Falcon and ended up limping along to Bespin. Luke, over the course of 3 months training with Yoda, is able to lose a respectable 55 pounds and is down to a still morbidly obese 250. And one day, Luke has a vision that Han and Leia are in trouble. So Yoda is like, "Not complete your diet is. For nothing all your training will be if you go." But Luke is like, "I don't care. Peace." And then he flies off. Upon getting to Bespin, he finds them trucking Han around in carbonite, and Boba Fett starts leading him towards the freezing chamber. Leia's like, "Luke, no, it's a trap." But Luke doesn't really care. He keeps going and ends up making it to the freezing chamber to find Vader. And Vader says, "The Force is with you, young Skywalker. But you are too fat to be a Jedi." So Luke looks up the stairs at Vader, standing there ominously, and instead of walking up the stairs like a man, he takes out his lightsaber and just stands at the bottom. Vader realizes after a few moments that he is not going to be coming up the stairs, so within his helmet he just kind of rolls his eyes, ignites his saber, and then walks down to begin the fight. Meanwhile, Lando frees Leia and Chewie. They go to save Han, but, they're not there in time. Boba Fett takes off with them, and they're all sad. Luke and Vader are fighting now, and Vader says, "You've learned much, young one." And Luke says, "You'll find I'm full of surprises." And Vader says, "Maybe full of donuts," which, of course, causes this twinge of pain right in Luke's heart. Luke falls back into the freezing chamber, being distracted by the comment, and while Vader turns to turn it on, Luke jumps with all of his force might to only just barely get out of the thing, rolling on the ground and pulling his lightsaber to himself. And Vader's like, it's not really that impressive. Then they start swinging sabers again, and Vader says, "Obi-Wan has taught you well. You have control of your fear. Now you need to get control of your diet." They keep fighting, and Vader is intentionally handicapping himself, of course because he's trying to capture Luke and not kill him. Luke knocks him off of the edge of the little platform they are on, and they end up meeting in the hallway downstairs after a couple of minutes. Vader starts throwing things at Luke in the Force. The window breaks, which causes that decompression suction, and Luke does not get sucked out of the window because he's just too heavy to be moved. So they keep fighting, and Vader ends up backing him up outside of the room onto that little walkway that's just ominously hanging over the massive chamber in the middle of Cloud City. Vader, with precision and elegance, severs Luke's hand from his body, and Luke screams like a child. Vader says, "Luke, join me, and I will complete your training." And Luke says, "I'll never join you." And Vader says, "If you only knew the power of the dark side. We have cookies." And Luke is like, "What kind of cookies?" And Vader says, "Oatmeal raisin." And Luke laughs at the offer. So Vader says, "Fine. Obi-Wan never told you about your dad." And Luke is like, "He did too. You killed him." And Vader says, "I am your father." And Luke is like, "That is not true." And Vader's like, "You know it is." So Luke kind of looks down at his body and says, "So was mom like, And Vader says, "Like what?" And Luke says, how do I put this? A plus-sized woman?" And Vader's like, no, that's all you, son." So Luke jumps and slides down the little slide, and it drops in onto the TV antenna that's just sticking outside the bottom of Cloud City. And let me tell you, that thing just about falls right the heck off. There are a couple bolts on there, and they are pulling their weight, I tell you. So he calls out to Leia in the Force, and she's like, "Oh snap, we gotta go back." And they do. And Lando goes out on the roof of the Falcon to get Luke, and he looks up and sees him hanging there and says, "Aw, heck no." And Luke lets go and lands on Lando, who falls over and is like, "Frick, boy, eat a salad, for goodness sake." And they end up getting inside. Leia's like, "Hey, pal, how you doing? Just so you know, I'm with Han now, but I'm so glad to have a friend like you." And they blast off to lightspeed. Luke gets his mechanical hand put on while he's on the medical frigate and discreetly asks a few questions about liposuction, but decides against it. Well, that is my video for today. I will be coming out with the third part to this one, which is going to be on Return of the Jedi, fairly soon, probably next week. I would be very grateful if you'd come back and have a look at that one. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and all that garbage.